Hello students. Today we're going to look at a continuation of what we've been doing. We learned point slope form yesterday, and today I want to look at what do we do when we have point slope form and we need to convert that form of the linear equation into a different form, like slope-intercept or standard form. So we're going to practice doing that, and there's some hints and some tricks that we want to make sure that you understand. So I've got an equation in point slope form. So I've got y minus 11 equals 3 times the quantity of x minus 2. And one thing that we might need to do is to convert this to slope-intercept form, okay? And so what we have to do is, first of all, do the distributive property. And with slope-intercept form, we know y is by itself, so then we'll just get y by itself. So I have y minus 11 equals 3x minus 6. I use the distributive property. Now I got to get y by itself. Okay, so thankfully the coefficient of y is 1, so I don't have anything to do there. So I'm just going to move the negative 11 to the other side. So I have y equals 3x minus 6 plus 11. Because remember, when you move a negative to the other side, it becomes a positive. So then my final answer is y equals 3x plus 5. So that is this y minus 11 equals 3 times the quantity of x minus 2 in slope-intercept form. I just solved for y. The next thing they might ask us to do, though, is to take that same equation and give it to them in standard form. Okay? Remember that standard form is x and y on the same side, and then the constant on the other side. I'm going to throw in another caveat with that, though. You cannot have a negative x, and you cannot have a fraction in your standard form. Okay? So those are two things we're adding to what we already learned about standard form. No negative x's and no fractions. Okay? So we have y equals 3x plus 5. Right now, the x is positive, and it needs to stay positive. So I'm going to leave the 3x right where it is. That means I have to move the y and I have to move the 5. I'm going to do one at a time because we're learning. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is to move the 5. So I'm going to take the 5, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So that means y minus 5 equals 3x. Now I need to move the y to the same side as the 3x. So I'm going to subtract y from both sides. So I get negative 5 equals 3x minus y. And then if that freaks you out, then you can just rewrite it as 3x minus y equals negative 5. So first I have it in point slope form. And then I have it in slope-intercept form. And then down here, I have it in standard form. It's important that we know how to get to all of those. So if I'm given point slope, solve for y to find the slope-intercept form, and then put x and y on the same side. No negative x's, no fractions for standard form. So with my next example, I have y plus 2 equals negative 3/4 times the quantity of x plus 1. That's my equation of a line in point slope form. So now I need to convert it to slope-intercept form. So I solve for y. First thing I need to do is distributive property. So I have y plus 2 equals negative 3/4 x minus 3/4. Minus 3/4. Okay? I just used distributive property. Negative 3/4 times x, negative 3/4 times 1 is negative 3/4. Okay? Now I need to solve for y. So I move the 2 to the other side. So I have y equals negative 3/4 x minus 3/4 minus 2. Because the 2 is positive, move over here negative 2. And then the final answer is y equals negative 3/4 x minus 2 3/4 as my y-intercept. Okay, because negative 3/4 minus 2, use your calculator if you need to, it's negative 2.75 or negative 2 3/4. Now, I need to put it in standard form, okay, because this is slope-intercept form, this is point slope form. Now, then x is negative, so I've got to move the x to make it positive. So I'm going to move the x to the other side, and I get 3/4 x plus y, because y is positive, it's going to stay positive, equals negative 2 3/4. And you say, oh, thankfully I'm done. No, you're not, because you have a fraction. We cannot have fractions in standard form. So here's the trick. If I have a fraction in standard form, multiply everything by the denominator. Say that again. When I have a fraction in my standard form, then I'm just going to multiply everything by the denominator to get rid of the fraction. Okay? I'm doing it on both sides, so it's still legal. So I'm going to multiply everything by 4. So 4 times 3/4 is simply 3x, because the 4's cancel out, yada, yada, yada. And then 4 times 1 would be 4y. Here's the tricky part. I've got negative 2 and 3/4 times 4. So I could do that on my calculator, or I could quickly convert that to 11 over 4 and multiply negative 11 over 4 times 4, and that's just going to be equals negative 11. So my standard form would be 3x plus 4y equals negative 11. Just to clarify, in standard form, no fractions at all, and x must be positive. Now y and the constant can be negative, but we want x to be positive. 3x plus 4y equals negative 11. And here's one more example, okay? Let's just practice with those fractions. My point slope form is y minus 1/4 equals negative 3 times the quantity of x plus 1/4. So I'm going to distribute a property. Y minus 1/4 equals negative 3x minus 3/4, because negative 3 times positive 1/4 is negative 3/4. Now I'm going to solve for y. So that means I need to move the negative 1/4 to the other side. It becomes positive 1/4. So y equals negative 3x minus 3/4 plus 1/4. And when I have negative 3/4 plus 1/4, I get y equals negative 3x minus 1/2. Because negative 3/4 plus 1/4 is negative 2/4, which simplifies to negative 1/2. So I've got y equals negative 3x minus 1/2. Is that okay? Absolutely. It's okay to have a fraction in slope-intercept form. I just cannot have a fraction in standard form. So let's do standard form. The x is negative, so I need to move it to make it positive. So I'm going to add 3x to both sides, or just move it over the equal sign. So I get 3x plus y equals negative 1/2. Now I still cannot have a fraction. I don't care if it's a constant. You cannot have a fraction in standard form. So I have to multiply everything by the denominator. My denominator is 2. So I'm going to multiply everything by 2. 2. So 2 times 3x is 6x. 2 times y is positive 2y equals 2 times negative 1/2 is negative 1. So my standard form is 6x plus 2y equals negative 1. Standard form, 6x plus 2y equals negative 1. Slope-intercept form, y equals negative 3x minus 1/2. Point slope form, y minus y1 equals negative 3 times the quantity of x plus 1/4. All of those are exactly the same line written in different forms. So we've got to get used to converting between the forms of the equation. And here are your 2 practice problems for this video. Both of them say write each equation in slope-intercept and standard form. So the first equation is y plus 7 equals 2 times the quantity of x plus 5. I need it in slope-intercept and standard form. And then I have y plus 2 equals negative 3/4 times the quantity of x plus 1. I need it in both slope-intercept and standard form. When you get done, take a picture of those problems, submit it through Edmodo.